ॐ यश्छन्दसां ऋषभो विश्वरूपा छन्दोऽभ्योऽध्यमृतात् सम्बभूव समेन्द्रो मेधया स्पृणोतु अमृतस्य देवधारणो भूयासं शरीरं मे विचर्षणं जिह्वा मे मधुमत्तमा कर्णाभ्यां भूरिविश्रुवम् ब्रह्मणः कोशोऽसि मेधया पिता श्रुतं मे गोपाय ॐ शान्ति शान्ति शान्तिः मङ्गलाचरणम्
यो ब्रह्माण्डमिदं करोति सुकरं सत्यं शिवं सुन्दरं यस्यानुग्रहमाप्तुमेव सुजना सर्वे यतन्ते सदा भक्तिं यस्य विना कदापि पुरुषो मुक्तिं न वै विन्दते वेदान्ते च यमाहुरेकपरमं देवाय तस्मै नमः.
So last time we saw in chapter 3 that how the Vedic literature grew to a huge mass and created confusion. So after that we are seeing the developments in India. So this chapter is about Badarayana Vyasa, that means his advent and his Brahma Sutra. So though there was utter confusion and chaos in the realm of philosophy and theology in India during the period between the 8th and the 6th century BCE, there were some marvelous developments in the field of languages. Different dialects were in vogue in different parts of this vast country. The dialect used by the learned was Sanskrit. The understanding of the Vedas, which were in Sanskrit, necessitated the knowledge of the use of Sanskrit words in their proper senses. So some grammarians like Shakatayana, Gargya, Shakalya, they observed and studied the dialects of the learned and cultured people and the norms instinctively followed by them while forming words and sentences. Based on the dialects of cultured people, they tried to formulate and formalize the rules of grammar for all. Further, so that there will be some uniformity in the language. Further, a rare genius like Panini studied the various styles and practices of Sanskrit language in different parts of India and formulated the rules of Sanskrit grammar with an almost mathematical precision. Though later grammarians like Katyayana and Patanjali, they introduced some supplements and modifications to Panini's rules. His original framework of grammar remained as the criterion for deciding the appropriateness of a word or a sentence. This brought a uniformity in using Sanskrit language. Professor MacDonnell says the Sanskrit grammarians of India were the first to analyze word forms and recognize the difference between root and suffix to determine the functions of suffixes and on the whole to elaborate a grammatical system so accurate and complete as to be unparalleled in any other country. The other vernacular languages in India have adopted the same rules with some modifications. So the sum and substance is the various dialects, they were converted into standard languages or classical languages. So now then another development is the art of writing. Possibly the same period between the 8th and the 6th century BCE, there were attempts to develop the art of writing down the spoken words in all the languages. David Diringer, a British scholar, he says, on the whole, many different lines of evidence suggest a date between the 8th and 6th century BCE for the introduction of writing in Aryan India, that is civilized India. He further opines that it is generally admitted that the earliest known form of Brahmi is a script framed by the Brahmanas for writing Sanskrit, and it may be assumed that they were the inventors of this essentially national alphabet, regardless of the problem concerning the original source of the idea. That means it is not known who first mooted that idea. The fully developed Brahmi system, an outcome of the remarkable philological and phonological precision, wherein the earlier Indians surpassed all ancient peoples, provided the various Indian languages with an exact reflex of their pronunciations. The Indian sages and the scholars in those days were so humble that they neither tried to leave their names attached to their inventions. These so and so has invented this letter, something like that. So they didn't do that one, or they did not claim credit, copyright, or patent for them. So it is futile to discuss about who developed what and who influenced whom, as done by the Western scholars. So Western scholars, they are always interested in saying the Indians copied from the Greek or from the Roman script and something like that. Nothing like this. Indian scripts are invented by the Indian scholars only. Maybe they might have copied. We don't know. So it is futile to discuss about who developed what and who influenced whom, as done by the Western scholars. The fact of the matter is that we can safely assume that by 5th century BCE, the Devanagari script for writing down the phonetic Sanskrit words was developed. I feel that for this assumption, we need not wait for the discovery of an epigraph or a coin, for there are other evidences available. Though the three popular works of Panini, Sutrapatha, which is called as Ashtadhyay, and Dhatupatha and Ganapatha of the great grammarian Panini, ascribed to the 5th century BCE, were in phonetic form. The sutras were in phonetic form only, but he was aware of the development of script. In his Sutra 3.2.21, that means Vyakarana Sutra, Ashtadhyay, in his Sutra 3.2.21, he told how the word Lipikara, meaning a scribe or a writer, was formed from the word Lipi, meaning script or handwriting. David Diringer has provided another evidence. He says a Buddhist tract of the Suttantas, they are their granthas, or the conventional discourses of Buddha, called Sila Sutta, attributed to the middle of the 5th century BC, mentions a game for children. The name of the game is Akkarika, that means lettering. So he further opines that we may thus assume that in the 5th century BC and probably also in the 6th century BC, knowledge of writing was widespread, known to adults and children of both the sexes. In addition to the three popular works of Panini mentioned above, there is another work named as Paniniya Shiksha, ascribed to him. This work is in the form of aphorisms, that is sutras, as well as in that of verses. Some scholars hold that both are composed by Panini himself, and some opine that the second one is composed by his brother. In the second version, the term Likhita Patakaha, meaning those who read or chant from the written text, is used. This proves beyond doubt that the art of writing was widely known by 5th century BCE. Further, the Devanagari script is so versatile that it can express all the nuances of spoken vowels, consonants, and accents. One may wonder that Panini recognized 18 varieties of uttering each of the vowels. Now you know E and U. You know only two varieties, Rasva and Dirgha. E, E, U, U. But in each, Panini has said there are 18 varieties, Rasva, Dirgha, and Pluta. And in each of these three varieties, Udatta, Anudatta, and Swarita. So 3 into 3, 9. And in each of these 9, one is Anunashika and another one is Ananunashika. Like that, 18 varieties are there. So when we chant mantras, so each one is not only Rasvadirgha, but it has got its own accent. For example, in the Pavamana Sutta, what we say is Om Swadhisthaya Madhisthaya Pavasvaso Madharaya Indraya Patave Sutaha. Here we don't say Patave, it is Patave, and Dharaya, not Dharaya, Dharaya. So that Swarita also is there. There is another phrase in Pavamana Sutta. It is pronounced as Dive Dive. Actually, both are Dive Dive only written there. Both are Hrastva only, Dive Dive. But one is Anudatta and another one is Swarita. So they say Dive Dive. It is not Dirgha. So like that, there are differences. There are 18 varieties of each swara, each vowel. So that whatever mantra they are chanted, they can be written and again repeated like that only. So this enabled the sages to express in black and white all the Vedic knowledge handed down orally from unknown antiquity without any mutilations. Just as the inventions of telegraphic signals and telephone proved revolutionary in the field of communication in 20th century, in those days, the art of writing in 5th century BCE, the art of writing created a revolution in communication. The oral teaching and preaching can reach a limited audience present in front. On the other hand, a written message can not only reach persons at a distance but also remain on record for posterity. Unfortunately, this did not happen in the case of Gautam Buddha. According to David Diringer, the Lalita Vistara, a life of Buddha, relates that the Buddha studied writing, writing in childhood. That is the first half of 6th century BC. Yet Buddha did not write anything. It was later, about 300 years after him. His followers compiled the teachings ascribed to him and put them in writing in Pali. Pali is a dialect of Magadha, now in Bihar. The followers hold that Buddha said this and Buddha said that, and on some vital points they tell that he kept his noble silence. It is difficult to believe on what Buddha actually said or what he did not say. Even on some cardinal metaphysical points, no one is sure as to what Buddha held. The compilations of his teachings done later show the influence of thoughts that existed even before Buddha and those that appeared after him, as well as of the Upanishads. So, Buddha said something, but they recorded that he said this and he said that. Anyway, the Vedic seers, however, took extra care to see that the knowledge revealed to them was handed down to posterity without any interpolation or corruption. Even though they did not have the art of writing, they had developed the science of prosody, that is chandas, and hence they could compose the information in so many verses with different meters that could be sung in rhythm. These verses had the vowels in them arranged in a rigid pattern with a particular accent on each, so that any change in a vowel or accent on it could upset the rhythm and alert the singer that there was some error in reciting. Moreover, they devised certain methods of recitation in which the syllables in a verse were interchanged in a pre-decided permutation and combination. For example, the Ghanapatha, without any regard to the meaning of the verse, is just like a checklist. The purpose was to see that not even a single syllable was lost or changed in course of time. As a result, even today, these hymns or Veda mantras could be recited all over the country exactly in the same way as they were recited 3000 years back. Thanks to many scholars who chose not to take up any secular profitable profession or business for their livelihood, even though they could have taken, and preferred to live a penurious but highly respected life on the arms of some royal or well to do families, and to pursue the job of learning, protecting, and handing down the Vedic literature orally from one generation to another with a missionary zeal. Hindus today should be highly grateful and indebted to these unknown scholars who sacrificed their worldly enjoyments in order to protect the wealth of ancient knowledge for the humanity. So far we saw the development of language and the developed art of writing, and they protected the Vedic literature. Then in 5th century there was a turning point. The middle of 5th century BCE proved to be a turning point in the history of Hinduism. A rare genius, a bright star, arose on the Indian horizon. A boy was born on an island in the river Yamuna. His father was the great saint Parashara, and mother was a fisherman's daughter, Satyavati. The boy was not born with a silver spoon in his mouth because he was the grandson of a fisherman, or with a handsome physique. He was having an ugly physique, but was endowed with an extraordinary intelligence. Since he had a dark complexion, he was named as Krishna, meaning black. At the age of 8, when he entered the Gurukula, a residency school in a hermitage, the boy came to be known as Krishna Dvaipayana. He was given a surname because he was born on a Dvipa, that is an island. So he is Krishna Dvaipayana, that is Krishna the islander, possibly to distinguish him from other boys with the same name Krishna, because there may be many boys with the name Krishna, Rama and all. So they gave a surname, just as we say, he is Krishna Sanglikar, Kolhapurkar, Satarkar, like that. He was called as Krishna Dvaipayana. His date of birth is not known. Krishna Dvaipayana and Jaimini were contemporaries. Panini does not mention Krishna Dvaipayana anywhere. So Krishna Dvaipayana must be later than Panini. However, another grammarian, Patanjali, does refer to him, that is Krishna Dvaipayana. Moreover, Patanjali is shown as the ninth descendant of in that Jaimini's lineage. So the dates of Panini and Patanjali are fairly agreed to as 500 BCE and 150 BCE respectively. Therefore, Krishna Dvaipayana's period could be between 500 to 400 BCE. That means it is in 5th century, middle of 5th century. All this is only a guesswork because there is no record available. So from circumstantial evidences, I have reduced this date. It is between 500 to 400 BCE. That is 5th century. The general practice till then in India was that when a batch of students graduated or completed their study in a hermitage or in a residency school after 12 years of training, they used to disperse and find an occupation either as a priest in a royal palace or a temple or as an advisor to a king in his judicial decisions, or they set up their own schools with the financial help from a king or some rich people. These were the practices. However, during the convocation, all this is guesswork. So it happened like this. During the convocation function or the last function of this batch of Krishna Dvaipayana, the chief guest was said to be a Saint Kanva, and he in his address kept a new proposal, a new ideal before the outgoing young graduates. As per a legend, Kanva said, this is his Kanva speech, there is no dearth of schools today. There is no dearth of teachers today. The scholars learning something from somebody and start teaching whatever they learned. There is no set curriculum, no syllabus, and there are no standard textbooks. The need of the hour is to prepare the material to be taught in the schools. Vedic knowledge is now scattered all over among the different traditional schools that needs to be collected, collated, edited, and put in black and white. The spiritual knowledge and experience of great individuals, rishis, is remaining with them and getting lost. That needs to be collected and recorded for the benefit of posterity. In addition, there is a need to write the history of human progress, the conflict between the noble and the wicked tendencies among the people, the struggle between the human strengths and weaknesses, and so on. For history serves as a guide for the common people to chart their future course of action. Therefore, instead of dispersing all over, I wish that young and intelligent graduates like you should vow to organize yourself and take up this great work. So they were advised like this. The idea appears to have caught the imagination of the young graduates. They accepted the challenging task and set up a hermitage and an organization under the leadership of Krishna Dvaipayana at the confluence of the river Alakananda and Saraswati, about 3 kilometers on the northwest of Badrinath. The sacred place was popularly known as Keshava Prayaga and Shamyaprasatirtha. The place being about 10,500 feet above sea level in the Himalayas and therefore subject to heavy snowfall during winter, The team reportedly shifted their camp to the bank of Ganga at Haridwar in winter. Then Krishna Dvaipayana came to be known as Badarayana, a rather baffling name. An old edition of Apte's dictionary held that he was called as Badarayana because this is all my research work. So, an old edition of Apte's dictionary held that he was called as Badarayana because he was a resident of Badari. An Indian scholar, Satyakama, held that he was called Badarayana because he was a worthy student of a sage called Badara. Both of these explanations are not convincing, for in that case, he should have been called as Badari. If he is a student of Badara, he should be called as Badari. And if he is a resident of Badari, then he should be called Badari. Moreover, this Prachina Charitra Kosha, which chronicled such prehistoric personalities, did not make any mention of such a sage called Badara. There was no sage by the name Badara. However, it did make a mention of a sage Badari, and Krishna Dvaipayana himself in his Brahma Sutra referred to this sage Badari 4 times. Therefore, I feel that in all probability, Krishna Dvaipayana got this name Badarayana because he was a distinguished student of Badari. So in some sutras he says, Iti Badari, this is what Badari was telling. So he was quoting his own teacher. So I have deduced that he was called as Badarayana because he was a student of sage Badari. Then the monumental work of collecting and writing Vedic literature. Since it was a huge work, in course of time, Badarayana co-opted some selected fresh graduates from different schools. The group had different teams of different specific jobs, headed by competent sages like Jaimini, Vaishampayana, Paila, Sumanta, and Romaharshana. They fanned out and visited different traditional schools over India and collected the compositions and classified them into 4 divisions known as Rigveda, Yajurveda, Samaveda, and Atharvana Veda. In each division of these Vedic compositions, there were subdivisions called shakhas. The team for the work of collecting, collating, editing, and writing the compositions of Rigveda was headed by Paila. Yajurveda group was headed by Vaishampayana, and Samaveda group was headed by Jaimini, and Atharvana Veda by Sumanta. And each Veda included all its associated texts like Mantra Samhitas, Brahmanas, Aranyakas, and Upanishads. We have seen what are the different parts of Vedas. So they were collecting all concerned with that particular Veda. Of course, the editor-in-chief was Badarayana, and therefore he got the name as Vedavyasa, the editor par excellence of Vedas. Then Romaharshana helped Vedavyasa in collecting and writing the Puranas. And this Romaharshana died early, and his work was continued by his son Ugrashrava. So this is about collection of the Vedas. Then there is one traditional view that they opposed me when I put this proposal that Vedavyasa wrote all these Vedas and all. They said Vedavyasa did not write because in those days writing Vedas was considered as a sin. So you are not correct. This is our own professors and others, they were arguing with me. then I did not agree. So my view I have given here. So reliable historical information about the development of Vedic literature is not available. The chronology of who composed what and when is not known. Most of the information available is just a conjecture. The traditional belief is that Vedavyasa did not write down the Vedas, since writing and reading of Veda mantras were considered as a sin. He only collected all the Veda mantras and classified them into four broad divisions called Rigveda, Yajurveda, Samveda, and Atharvaveda, and subdivided each one into its various branches. He also composed Mahabharata and Bhagavata Purana and taught them to his disciples orally. Further, he collected the other Puranas and gave them to his disciples orally. This is what they argue. It is true that it is nearly impossible to learn reciting Veda mantras from a script or print. Therefore, in order to teach the correct recitation, a method known as Santha is used. In that, the teacher recites a piece of mantra and the student repeats. When the student is repeating, the teacher observes and corrects if required. And leave alone the mantras, even some of the modern stotras like Shiva Mahimna Stotra are difficult to recite from written copies. Last year, that is in 2016, I taught a stotra in Sanskrit to my son, daughter-in-law and two granddaughters aged 10 and 7 by this Santha method. However, my son and daughter-in-law were having printed copies of the stotra in their hands. My granddaughters, who were not conversant with Devanagari script, were only listening and repeating. I found that my elder granddaughter was quick to pick up the stotra and to join me in reciting. Thus, the oral method of teaching recitation is certainly preferable. However, in spite of all the contrivances like and etc., when the Vedic scriptures were traditionally handed down orally from generation to generation, additions, alterations, and interpolations could not be avoided altogether. Even if such variants are pointed out, no one would be ready to change them on account of egotism. For example, once I saw in a temple a popular stotra in Sanskrit carved on a marble slab. I found some lines of that stotra topsy-turvy, affecting its meaning. When I brought that discrepancy to the temple authorities, I got the reply that our tradition has taught us like this. So we don't bother about meaning and all. Thus, it is difficult to change the variants introduced by tradition. So Badarana and his team of dedicated scholars must have started their mission to collect all the Vedic material scattered over a number of schools, hermitages, and teachers, and to reconcile the huge volume of scriptures into one system. Probably, when they found the variants too wide to reconcile into one system, they could have decided to fit the material into four broad systems and a number of subsystems or branches. For example, the same Purusha Sukta and Sri Sukta are recited in Rigveda and Yajurveda with some variants in words and accents. The term Ishwarim, uttered by Rigvedins in Sri Sukta, is recited by Yajurvedis as Ishwarigam, they will say, Ishwarigam. In Yajurveda itself, the Kanvashakhins recite the Purusha Sukta in one style and address the Lord as Purusha, whereas in Madhyandina Shakins recite the same sukta in a different style and address the Lord as Purukha. So this our Dhaneshwara belonged to this Madhyandina. So you must have seen in that picture when he makes a buffalo to sing Purusha Sukta, the buffalo also says Sahasra Shersha Purukha. He says Purukha because the Madhyandina Shakins they pronounce as Purukha only. Further, the Samavedins, instead of reciting the suktas, they sing them in their own style. Yet, in the face of such wide variants in Vedic scriptures of different traditions, Badarayana sought to evolve from them a comprehensive system, Vedanta, for the spiritual progress of the seekers through his masterpiece known as the Brahma Sutra. He had Badarayana and his team not recorded in writing their collection and classification of Vedic scriptures as held by some scholars, then in the absence of a standard text to refer to, further variants could have crept into the Vedic literature. In that case, the lifetime work of Badarayana and his team would have been reduced to null and void. The same could have been the case with the Puranas. If Badarayana's team had simply collected the Puranas in whole and given them to their disciples, then what was their team's solution? Because they were already there with so many people orally. So, as per a legend, Vedavyasa composed Mahabharata and Bhagavata Purana, and the deity Ganesha wrote them as described. That is the legend. So someone wrote them. In the same way, Badarayana could have got the other Puranas written under his direct supervision because these Puranas, inter alia, contained explanations of his Brahma Sutras. This Paniniya Shiksha, composed just before the advent of Vedavyasa, which listed the course of reciting Veda mantras, how to recite Veda mantras. They observed these, the actual verse is Kiti Shigri Shirah Kampi Tatha Likhita Pathakaha Anarthajnolpakanthascha Shadete Pathakadhamaha. They are Adhama Pathakaha. What it says is these 6 types of reciters, namely the one who sings Giti, and another one who is faster than usual. He is unusually faster, Shigri. And the third one is Shirah Kampi. Some people, while reciting the mantra, they say Sahasra Shirsha Purusha Sahasraksha. So like that, with Udatta and Anudatta, they change their head. They shake their head. So they head with the accents. Then the fourth type is they read from a written text. They don't see orally, they can't remember, so they read from a written text. They are called Likhita Pathakaha. And the fifth one is recite the mantra without knowing their meaning. Most of the people, they do like that only. Anarthajnaha. They don't know the meaning of the stotra or mantra what they recite. And the sixth one is Alpakanthascha. Alpakantha means they are very slow because nobody can hear them. They are afraid whether they are reciting correctly or not. So they are very slow in a low voice. So these 6 types are called low grade reciters. Who the one who sings, one is faster than usual, shakes his head with the accents, then the fourth one reads from a written text, and the fifth one recites the mantra without knowing their meaning, and sixth one utters the mantras in a feeble voice, are considered as low grade reciters. This verse confirmed 2 things, namely, the art of writing was in vogue during Badarayana's period, they say Likhita Pathakaha, and the writing down of the Veda mantras and reciting them from written copies were not forbidden. They were not banned as sin, but they were only denigrated. That means they are low grade reciters. Probably it could have been considered derogatory in the case of ordinary people for obvious reasons in order to avoid possible discrepancies. But the status of Badarayana and his team of geniuses was quite different. They were not writing down mantras for their own use in reciting them, but they were doing so to produce critical texts for the future generations to refer and to prevent the likely variants in future. So it cannot be dubbed as low grade reciter or their sin or anything. It's not correct. Some scholars believe that the Vedas were written down on birch leaves, Burjapatra, on birch leaves in 4th century CE and on paper in 13th century CE. This conclusion might have been arrived at relying on the oldest available book of birch leaves in some library. If one librarian argued with me like that, they were written in 4th century. So this could have been arrived at relying on the oldest available book of birch leaves in some library. If this were true, then those who wrote down the Vedas in 4th century CE should have been either celebrities or notorious characters, if it is a sin, for it was a huge work. The written leaves of Badarayana and his team would not be expected to survive today after 2500 years. So, in all probability, those who wrote the Vedas in 4th century CE or so would have copied them from the older versions. Therefore, in my considered opinion, Badarayana and his team not only collected, collated, and edited the Vedas and Puranas, but also put them in writing and produced standard critical texts for reference. Now, study of Vedic literature. The sages not only produced critical texts for existing Vedic compositions, but also studied them. Jaimini studied the Brahmana texts of all the Vedas and composed a work known as Purva Mimamsa, because Brahmana texts were concerned with the performance of sacrifices and the procedure and other things. So this was done by Jaimini. Purva Mimamsa, which decided how to interpret the Vedic injunctions and what was the correct procedure for performing religious rituals and sacrifices. So Badarayana reviewed the entire Vedas and pronounced his authoritative judgments on what exactly was the essence of Vedas, that is the philosophical part, and that is Vedanta, generally called as Hinduism or Hindu religion, in his masterpiece known as variously as it is known as Brahma Sutra, Vedanta Sutra, Uttara Mimamsa, and Brahma Mimamsa. All these four names refer to only one composition, that is Brahma Sutra. It is called as Brahma Sutra, Vedanta Sutra, Uttara Mimamsa, and Brahma Mimamsa. Then composition of Mahabharata. Because he had told, that Karna is said to have said, there is a need to write the history of human progress, the conflict between the noble and the wicked tendencies among people. That means what was the culture and the behavior of the common people. So that was to be collected and written. So that was done in Mahabharata. While collecting the Vedas from different schools, Badarayana also collected pieces and stories of history floating among the people. Then he composed his well known historical novel called Mahabharata, which depicted how the various human minds, tendencies, and powers worked for and against each other. The hero of this epic was, of course, the Lord himself in his incarnation as Krishna. The author showed how the good thereby how the God micromanaged the happenings and situations in the world. That is Brahman, Paramatman, how he managed the happenings and situations in the world. In Bhagavad Gita, forming a part of this epic Mahabharata, the author Vedavyasa described how a man should behave in different circumstances and even while passing through the thick and thin of the world, how he should continue his spiritual pursuit. This Mahabharata also included the original plot of another epic known as Ramayana, in which the hero again happened to be the Lord himself in another incarnation as Rama. The same story was developed later by the saint Valmiki into an epic. These two epics, Mahabharata and Ramayana, came down came to be known as histories or itihasas. In addition, Badarayana collected various existing mythologies or Puranas and put them in writing. Further, he composed his another most popular masterpiece, the Bhagavata Purana, his magnum opus, in which again the hero being the Lord Krishna himself. In all, there are 18 Puranas to his credit. In these Puranas, particularly in Bhagavata Purana, the author highlighted the art, science, and value of bhakti, devotion towards the God, which formed an important step in spiritual pursuit. Through these 18 Puranas and the two epics, Vedavyasa taught the applied Vedic philosophy to the masses and propagated the Vedic truths and values among them. Thus, Krishnadvaipayana was asked to write the history of human progress, and he did fulfill the same. But in addition, he created history himself. So, such a great work he has done. So, he created a history by himself. So, the entire Vedic literature comprising the Mantra Samhitas, Brahmanas, Aranyakas, Upanishads, the Brahma Sutra, the Puranas, the Mahabharata, and the Ramayana owe their existence today to this genius. This was really a tremendous and stupendous task. Whenever some extraordinary superhuman talent and power is seen in a person, Hindus ascribe it to God's manifestation in him. In Bhagavad Gita, Lord Krishna tells, Yadyad vibhutimatsatvam srimad urjitameva va tattadevavagachatvam mama tejonsha sambhavam. Among And he says, wherever there is a superhuman talent and power, understand that it is due to my presence there. And he also said, Vrishninam Vasudevosmi Pandavanam Dhananjaya Mulinamapyaham Vyasaha Kavinam Ushana Kavihi. He says, among the Vrishni clad, the Yadavas, I am the Krishna. Among the Pandavas, I am the Arjuna. Among saints, I am Vedavyasa. And among the seers, I am the seer Ushana. Ushana Panditavan, Ushana Kavi. So, Hindus consider Vedavyasa as an incarnation of the Supreme Lord. He is also believed to be an immortal. So, in a way, there are 7 immortals, Vedavyasa is one of them. In a way, it is correct also. Or, Vedavyasa was intelligence incarnate, and his intelligence is going to remain eternally through his great works. So he is always there. Many Hindus worship Vedas, many worship the Vedavyasa's idol alongside that of Rama or Krishna. Some worship his works like Bhagavata Purana. Many people they worship Bhagavad Purana in their house and Bhagavad Gita and or Brahma Sutra. The full moon day in the Hindu month of Ashadha, which falls in June or July, is called Guru Purnima, meaning the teacher's day in the Hindu religious circles. On that day, every year, the devout Hindus worship their respective preceptors, gurus, in groups. The day is also known as Vyasa Purnima in deference to the Vedavyasa, who is considered as the preceptor of all the preceptors. He is Gurunam Guru. Then we come to Brahma Sutra. By the time Vedavyasa composed his Brahma Sutra, there already existed some theological systems in vogue, advocated by great saints like Kapila, Kapila's Sankhya, its sister concern, Yoga. Sankhya and its sister doctrine, Yoga. They are couples. Later formalized by Patanjali, and then Gautama's Nyaya and its sister doctrine, Kanada's Vaisheshika. That is another pair. So even though all these theologians claim that their systems were based on Vedas and that they accepted the suzerainty of Vedas, what they gave in their doctrines were their own intuitive theories. All these theories were dry armchair thoughts and discussions, and they had nothing in them to touch the heart of a common man struggling in the world. Each one of these authors dangled a carrot that those who studied and followed this doctrine would get release from the suffering in the world. That is moksha. Though all these systems were evolved with the aim of removing the confusion in the minds of the followers of Vedas and providing them with a comprehensive system for their spiritual progress, they only added to their confusion. What was required was a stock taking, a review. It was necessary to tell the exact Vedic teaching, that is Vedanta, among the various and opinions. It was necessary to show the flaws in other competing doctrine, both orthodox, orthodox like Sankhya and heretical like Buddhism, and to give a road map for the spiritual development, achieving final. This task was accompanied by Badarayana Vyasa in his Brahma Sutra. This Brahma Sutra came to be recognized universally and unanimously as the manual of Vedanta, as the manual of Hinduism, and it was accepted as the standard text to be taught in all schools for spiritual pursuit. However, on account of the laconic nature of these sutras, the Brahma Sutra came to be interpreted differently in different schools. Badarayana could not be unaware of this, and possibly he was requested to write an explanatory text or guide to his work. But the saint, in his wisdom, did not choose to do so. He knew the human tendency of resorting to shortcuts to achieve the goal. Brahma Sutra was not a primary text, but It was meant to be a supplementary text. Brahma Sutra was not to be studied in place of Vedic literature, but in addition to it. So one should not avoid studying Vedic literature. We should first study Vedic literature and then come to Brahma Sutra. That was his expectation. The sutras were meant to remind or suggest the important topics in Vedic literature, to clarify the doubts therein, if any, and to decide the apparent controversies, if any. It was considered as a Nirnayaka Grantha, that is, a critical, conclusive text. However, Badarayana did not fail to take note of the requirement of explaining his sutras. Therefore, while writing the 18 Puranas and the two epics, he explained the import of many sutras. Some verses in Puranas appear to be an exact amplification and elaboration of some sutra, and many scholars think today that the Puranas are meant for some light entertainment for the laity, for the common people. They hold that Puranas are, after all, cock and bull stories. They cannot be taken as part of serious Vedic literature, and therefore they doubt how far the extracts from Puranas could be relied upon in a serious discussion on Vedanta. But one should know that the Upanishads consider these Puranas as the fifth Veda. See, four Vedas you know. So, but some Upanishads say these Puranas are the fifth Veda, Veda of the laity. Moreover, even in the so-called cock and bull stories, the story may be about a cock or a bull, but the moral behind the story is a serious truth. The legends in the epics and Puranas are meant to drive home the Vedic truths and the Vedanta among the masses, since the study of Vedas and Vedanta do not fall within their scope and ability. This Mahabharata considers the study of epics and the Puranas as a necessary supplement to the study of Vedas. It says one should amplify the Veda by Itihasa and Purana. The Veda is afraid of one of little earning, fearing this one would be distorting me. So that it says इतिहास पुराणाभ्याम वेदम समुपब्रह्मये विभेद अल्पश्रुताद वेदो माम अयम प्रतरिष्यति. So the study of Purana is also valued, it is respected. S.N. Dasgupta observes, it is highly probable that at least one important school of ideas regarding the philosophy of the Upanishads and the Brahma Sutra was preserved in the Puranic tradition. It may be believed that the views of the Vedanta as found in the Purana and the Bhagavad Gita present, at least in a general manner, the oldest outlook of the Upanishads and the Brahma Sutras. Thus, the contention of some scholars that the Puranas cannot be considered as part of Vedic literature or Puranas cannot be referred to for understanding the Brahma Sutras is not tenable. So, Puranas are also a good text to learn what is taught in the Vedas. They are not simply cock and bull stories, there are some serious truths.